Today I'm gonna read you a story, The Cellar. It is it is still Raleigh Jefferson's book, awesome friendly spooky story. So um it is the group of short story but it is about story, spooky stories. So and that's all funny, trust me. Okay, I'm gonna read the Cellar chapter. Long ago, there was a boy named Rave, and Rave was a very happy boy. He lived in a hut made from mud and straw with his parents. And even though they didn't have much, they were happy to have each other. Ravi's parents were very proud of their boy. He was growing up strong and healthy, and he never once complained about cleaning out the chicken coop. Scrap, cluck, cluck, cluck. Rafi would wake up at the crack of dawn and go to bed when the sun went down. And on special nights, Rafi's parents gave him a candle so he could stay up a little longer to read. Sometimes, if Rafe was enjoying a book, he'd stay up extra late and read under the covers. But it turns out that wasn't such a good idea back then. Raf's favorite stories were the ones about children, because Rev didn't have any friends of his own. In fact, Rafe had never met anyone besides his mom and dad. Sometimes Rafe would ask his parents if they could take a trip to a place where there were other people, but Rafe's parents said the journey would be too dangerous, and they showed him why. Had wolves, snakes, swam, sharks. So Rev made pretend friends out of mud and straw to play with, which was okay, but Rafe really wished he had the real thing. One night, one night after Ray finished reading, he went into the kitchen to get some water, but then he heard strange noises unlike anything he'd heard before. Bleep, 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 blorp. The sounds were coming from the cellar, and even though Rave was very curious about the noises, his parents had told him he must never ever go down into the cellar. Bleep bloop, bleep bloop. The next morning at breakfast, Rev described the mysterious sounds he heard the night before. Bleep bonk quack. But his parents said maybe Rafe had been dreaming because he was making nonsense noises. Rafe wanted to ask his parents what was in the cellar and why his dad was down there every Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but he knew they didn't like to talk about those things. Years passed and Rafe didn't hear the sounds again. By now, Rafe was 18 years old and was almost as tall as his father. Rafe's parents could see that the boy had become a man, and they said it was time to tell him the truth about where they came from. So they described a world with cars and aeroplanes and medicine and other things that made Rafe's head spin. They told Raphael the world they came from was wonderful in some ways, but there was a dark side too. Then they told him about the glowing objects called screens that had everyone under their spell. They explained that when Rave was born, they didn't want him to grow up under the spell of screen, so they made a decision to leave their world behind. All of a sudden, everything made sense to Ravi. His parents were time travelers, and they took him back to a simpler time to protect him. But when Ravi mentioned the time travel thing, his parents had a pretty good chuckle and told him he had it all wrong. Ha 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 ha. They said when they left their world behind, they meant they just moved away from the city and pretended they were living in the dark age. Then Travis dad said he had something he'd been waiting a long time to show him. So he opened the cellar door and took Rafe down the steps, where Rafe saw things that totally blew his mind, like a computer and a printer and a fancy chair on wheels. Rafe's dad said he had a job where he worked from home, and then he introduced Rafe to his co-workers. Hi Rafe! Oh my god. Okay, Rafi started to feel dizzy and said he needed to sit down, so he sat in his deck chair, which was a lot more comfortable than a crummy stool he was used to. Rafi's parents could see that their son wasn't happy and they felt kind of bad for lying to him all his life, and they thought maybe they'd gone a little overboard trying to protect him from the modern world. Then Rafa's dad got an idea for how to make it up to his son. He told Rafa that now that he was a grown man, there was something he should have, and he gave Rafa his very first phone. Rafa's parents said that there was one more secret they needed to tell him. They said they weren't surrounded by sharks and wolves and snakes, and that they were only a few miles from a big city. Then they said it was time for Rafi to join the modern world and get a job and start a family of his own. But now that Rafi had a phone, he wasn't interested in anything else, and he didn't see any reason to ever leave home. So Rafi's parents thought maybe they'd had the right idea to begin with. Blip blip blorp. Okay. Nama say hi. Nama Gigi. Hi Vito. Hi Hisham. Okay, next story. The title is The Nap. There once was there once was a woman who lived in a retirement community all by herself, and her name was Frances. Her family called her Great Aunt Franny, or just Franny for short. Speaking of her family, Franny didn't have any kids, but she had lots of nieces and nephews, and they had kids of their own, but none of them ever came to visit Franny because they were too wrapped up in their own lives to visit her. Franny lived in a little flat, but she had a really big TV. She needed a big TV because her eyesight wasn't that great, and the only thing that really made her happy was watching her soap operas. Every day, Franny would do the same thing. She'd watch her programs until she got tired, and then she'd take a nap in her comfy chair. And when she was done with her nap, she'd make herself a sandwich and watch more soap operas until the news came on. One day, while she was watching her programs, she saw an ad for something she thought might be useful for a person like her. It was this little gadget with a button, and if that you could press if you ever felt and needed help. Senior SOS help. Press for assistance. Freddy thought that might be good thing to have since he lived alone. So she called the number on the screen and placed an order, which was the first time she'd ever spent money on something like that. In fact, the only thing Franny ever did with her money was write checks for her nieces and nephews and their kids on their birthdays. Wait a minute, I'm gonna set the camera. Okay, and even though Franny was never late with a birthday card, she never got a thank you from everyone except for her 6-year-old great niece Amber, who was the only one in the family who wasn't rotten. Thank you for the money, great Aunt Franny, Amber. On the weekends, Franny's routine was a little different because her soap operas weren't on TV on those days. So she'd usually have a big lunch and then take an extra long nap afterwards. One Saturday, everyone in town was all excited because it was the day of the big game. And since the tickets to the big game were sold out, most people had to watch it on TV. Well, no one in Franny's family had a big TV, but they knew someone who did. So, a few hours before the big game, Gary, Meg, and a bunch of the guys piled into his pickup truck and headed to Great Aunt Franny's retirement community. Retirement community. But when they got to Franny's flat and knocked on the door, no one answered. So little Doggy turned the dark knob and it was unlocked. Aunt Franny was asleep in her comfy chair in front of the TV, and when they saw her sitting there with her head tilted forward, they thought she was dead. The guys were all pretty sad because Franny was their oldest relative and also because she was always on time with those birthday checks, but they didn't have a lot of time for tears because the big game was only a few hours away. So Gary Mack made a few calls and found a funeral home that could move things along that afternoon. Oh my god, so sad. It turned out the people at the funeral home wanted to watch the big game too. So after a quick service, everyone was out of there. You might be thinking, oh no, Great Aunt Franny got buried alive. But you probably forgot that Freddy ordered that electronic gadget, and when she woke up, she just pressed the button to call for help. Well, that thing worked just as good as they said it did in the advert, and help arrived a few minutes later. And luckily, the guys from the company figured out what happened pretty quick. Senior SOS screech. After they got Franny out of the ground, they gave her a lift back to her retirement community. And when Franny opened the door to her flat, she was pretty surprised by what she found. Oh my god. Gary Mac and the other guys were happy to see Franny alive, but they were also a little distracted because the big game was on and the score was really close. Gary Mac didn't want to give up his seat in the comfy chair in front of the TV, so Franny had to sit on the couch with the other guys. Goal! After the okay, after the big game was over, everyone thought Franny they sure were glad she was alive, but then they went home and left a huge mess for her to clean up on her own. After that day, things pretty much went back to normal, except Franny started putting a little less money in everyone's birthday cards. Franny also started locking the door to her flat before she sat down for her afternoon naps because she really didn't want a repeat of what happened before. And just to make double sure she didn't get buried alive again, she cut a ping pong ball in half and drew a dot on each side so she could look like she was awake even when she wasn't. A few months later, Amber found out what happened to Great Aunt Franny on the day of the big game, and she felt terrible about it. So she went to visit Franny at her flat. Freddie and Amber had a ball making cookies, and they promised they'd do it again soon. Still, leak. From that day on, every time the family had a get together, Amber made sure Franny was invited, and those were some of the happiest days in Franny's life. Boom boom plop plop. Gary Mac's family even invited her to join them on their summer holiday, and she was really excited about that. So this story kind of has happy ending because friend is good for nothing. Family turned themselves round before it was too late, and it was all because of the kindness of a 6-year-old girl. But this story has a sad ending too, because right before the start of the summer holiday, Great Aunt Franny passed away, and no one even noticed until the week was halfway over. Okay, that's the end.